The agenda has been adopted. We do not have any public comments, so we'll skip over that. Next is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda has been unanimously adopted 6-0. We'll move on to our principal-led data reports. Dr. Porter.
Good morning. We continue our look into each individual school with principal-led data days. These are presentations that our principals give us, the cabinet, and other people, and we are pleased to have them also present them to you. So first up, we have Dr. Kyra Young, the very proud principal of Elliott Battle Elementary. Madam President, we thought 10 minutes with 5 minutes for questions. Is that still appropriate? Okay.
All right, good morning. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to look at is our K-2 data, specifically with iReady. So if you take a close look at your screen, I'm actually going to flip to the next slide so we can highlight some key areas. So we are looking comparatively from this year to last year at the same time. So when you're looking at the 22-23 school year, it's at the exact same time last year. So when we look at that first percentage on the top left, you can see we had a 10% increase from last year to this year in our K-2 scores, specifically in reading. And then we also have had a slight increase in our math scores. Anywhere that you're seeing any of those blank areas, remember that's that less than 5% percentage there. A couple of other things to highlight, specifically with our K-2 students. We've had an increase in our scores for our free and reduced lunch students down at the bottom, you can see. So we had last year less than 5% of our students, and now we're up to 14% of our students. And then when we look right here in the middle at the circles I have there, you can see the cohort of students that we had in first grade last year. They increased their scores, so we had the less than 5% for both of the areas of on grade level to mid to above grade level. And now collectively, we have 22% of our students within those areas as second graders. And then lastly, another thing I want to highlight is another area of growth for our multiracial students. Over here on the right, we had less than 5% of them on grade level, and now we have 30% of them on grade level. So now this is our 3rd through 5th grade students. This slide is a little bit more alarming for us, and this is kind of the trend that we were seeing last year, and so we're really taking a closer dive to see like what tier 1 instruction we can have in place because we're not seeing the success that we want to have with our students. So you can see our scores seem pretty stagnant overall. So within reading, we had 8%, and it's still the same this year, as well as our math is less than 5% in both of those areas. And then if we look specifically at our multiracial students, though, we are seeing some growth there as well. So we had less than 5% on grade level, and now we are at 11% on grade level. And then our white students were at 14%, and now they're up to 19%. And just remember, our district improvement plan and our building improvement plan was to have that 5% growth. So we are seeing that with a couple of our subgroups. It's just not overall what we are wanting to see for all of our students. And then this slide points out our proficiency. So when you're looking at the left side of that, you can see that that is focusing on our MAP proficiency. So we're talking about students that are at the 55th percentile and above. So we have 8% of students that are hitting that in reading. And then when we look at the math, that is a key area for us that we were focusing on this year because as you can see, that is still less than 5%. And then when we look at the right side, we are talking about the Lexile quantile growth, and that's when we're looking at our iReady. Those are students who are meeting the 50th percentile or higher, and so we do have a little bit of a discrepancy there, but that's because it's a little bit lower of a bar with the iReady scores. And then when we look closely at our attendance, I have a couple of things I want to highlight here. So last year, we really focused on culture and attendance within our building. We had a very new staff, so we wanted to focus on having the culture being very positive for us. And then we focused on attendance with our students. And so you can see we have a slight growth there in our MSIP 6 attendance. But something I do want to highlight and celebrate at the end is just that we had an overall increase in our attendance percentage with MSIP 6, even though it is still below that 80% where we can get our APR points. We are making growth there. So I do want to highlight that and celebrate that with you all. And then we can look specifically at our Hispanic students. They had a huge increase in their attendance from last year to this year. So they went from 63% to 85.2%. Things that we want to look specifically at, we want to celebrate our fourth grade students who are now at 91.6%. They are our only grade level right now that's above the 90% with our MSIP 6 attendance. So we want to celebrate that as well, and then take a closer look at why do we have lower attendance rates specifically for our Asian and Black students? They have decreased, but then other subgroups, they have increased their attendance percentages. So we want to take a closer look at that. And then we have our behavior incidences as well as OSS. And so you will see with our OSS rates from last year to this year, they have increased slightly. And then we have also increased the number of incidences that we have within our system. We are looking specifically at that because right now we have 88% of our OSS reports are fighting or physical contact, which feels very heavy at times. And so we're just trying to ensure that, number one, safety is our top priority in our building, and that you are safe and you are loved and you are cared for so that you can learn within your classroom setting. And so if you look specifically at our Black students, I know that is something that we are constantly watching. We see that we have an increase of 10 from last year. So that is very concerning for us, and we're constantly watching that and trying to put proactive measures in for our students to ensure that they understand, like, it's not okay to fight at school, but we have to be here, we have to be successful, and we have to be kind to our friends. And then when we look down at our IEPs, they're about the same as last year. And I know, like, one question that we talked about with Cabinet this week was making sure that we're watching our IEP with the discrepancy between subgroups. And actually, when we look at our population, our majority of our population is Black. But when we look at our IEP students, 42% of those are Black that are being suspended. So it is lower than, honestly, I anticipated, but we want to continue to make sure that we are focusing on that and making sure that we are being equitable for all students. So these next two slides will focus on kick-up, and so this is what we're seeing when we're going into classrooms. So the top part of this is our rigor analysis. We are seeing a few areas that we need to grow on, and so this is one of those areas. We want to have higher levels of rigor when we go into the classroom, and then that will hopefully help increase our academic performance. And then on the bottom, you can see our student engagement. Most of our student engagement is authentic, but we do have some areas where we have some compliant engagement. So we want to focus on that as an area as well. And then we have our instructional practices that are high yield. Most of the high yield practices that we are seeing are teacher directed, and we want to see more of those being student directed. So they are in charge of their own learning and guiding what they're doing on a daily basis. At the bottom, you'll see essential questions. This is also another area of growth for us, making sure we have our learning targets posted and having those essential questions so students know what they're learning and why they're learning it. So overall, as you all know, we do attendance, behavior, and academics as our three key areas that we want to focus on. So I just wanted to highlight for you all the strengths in each of those areas as well as the challenges that we are currently facing at Battle. So if you look at the area of attendance, we are currently at 79.6% for our MSIP 6, which is an increase from last year. When we look at our challenges in that area, we are looking at a decrease in our Asian and Black subgroup attendance rates, which we are seeing is directly correlated to our Asian students not increasing in their math scores for K2, and they're also not increasing for 3-5 in math and reading as well. In the area of behavior, we have seen a decrease in our K2 suspensions from 20 down to 13. And we've also had a decrease in physical aggression and contact towards adults, which is huge for us. We had a lot of that last year. And then with our challenges, we have seen an increase in our third grade students, specifically our Black students in third grade being suspended. A lot of our fights are coming from that area. And so we have actually worked with our district behavior support to create a group for them so that they are understanding social skills and how to interact with each other without getting upset and resorting to any type of physical contact. And the last area is academics. So our K2 students are growing. We have that 10% growth overall in reading. We have also seen a huge growth with our first grade cohort of students. So we went from less than 5 up to 22% in that proficiency and mastery in reading. And then all of our races within our reading in K2 grew. That huge area of concern for us is our stagnant scores for math for 3rd through 5th grade. So things that we are doing to improve. So we're doing things on a daily basis. Our motto is everyone better every day. That goes with EBE. So we have the EBE acronym, and that's what guides what we do every day. So we have daily attendance trackers. You'll see my first grade student down here at the bottom, he is filling out his attendance calendar, and they do that on a daily basis to show if they're at school. So they have a green if they're there, red if they're not. And so that's at the student level. Grade levels also track their attendance rates, as well as at the building level, we have scoreboards in our hallways that you can see posted on a daily basis. And our attendance secretary also posts the daily attendance. We have a consistent system now, so we work closely with our secretary. My homeschool communicator, Mrs. Goolsby, is fantastic. She does great with connecting with our families, and so she has like her protocol, and then lastly, it falls on me. We are scheduling meetings with families as we speak to ensure that we are helping support them to get their kids to school. And then lastly, we celebrate our students at our Lion Pride assemblies based on their attendance. We also celebrate other areas at our assemblies as well. For behavior, we now have a behavior committee this year. Last year, we didn't have quite as focused committees as we would have liked to have had. So this year we have a behavior committee. And then when we talk about academics, we also have a literacy and math committee this year, which we did not have last year. So we're having more of a targeted area of focus. We have implemented school-wide PBS this year. Thank you to you all for your approval on getting that going. And so we are targeting specific areas and behaviors within our building to ensure everybody understands the expectations. We are reinforcing behaviors through our sticker charts and sticker system. So students get a sticker and that positive praise and reinforcement. And then when they get 25 stickers, they come to the office and get even more praise. And then, like I said, we have that third grade gentlemen's group with behavior support that we are supporting them to help them understand those social skills and how to react if someone does make you upset. And then lastly, academics, we have taken a deeper dive into our data. So not only did we look at iReady, but we did some additional assessments this year, specifically in the area of reading, to ensure that when we're grouping our kids within small group and our interventions, that we have a targeted focus. And it's not just, iReady tells me this, now I'm putting them in this group, but it's not specific to what that kid really needs. So we've really worked hard on that. And then within our PLCs and professional development, we're working on our effective instructional practices and making sure that we have effective instructional practices across all subject areas. And then lastly, I already talked about the committees, but then we have the iReady lessons. Thank you to you all again for that. And so we have started implementing those, and kids really love them, and they're seeing success of like, this is on my level. Now I can be successful and continue to grow and push myself. All right, so lastly, just some celebrations overall. Like I said, I wanted to celebrate that attendance percentage. So last year on an MSIP 6 attendance percentage, we had an 8.6 increase from the 21-22 school year to 22-23. So we went from 63.9 to 72.5. Overall, right now, we are 79.6. Not quite where we want to be because we want to get those points for our APR, but we are seeing that growth, and we will continue to push to have even more growth. We have those committees that are targeted for what we really need in our building. They're doing phenomenal work. I welcome you to come and visit anytime we're having a committee meeting because it is teacher-led, and it's all the things that they're doing. They're taking a deeper dive at our MAP data and what standards we really need to focus on. We have had a retention of our staff, and our staff vacancies are low. So 1 out of 24 of our teachers, that includes K-5 classroom teachers, district classrooms, as well as our specials, one of those was new this year, which is huge because last year we had over 50% of our teachers were new in our building. Staff vacancies, we have 2 paraprofessionals as a vacancy, as well as 1 classroom aide. That's huge for us. Again, last year we had 1 out of 4 classroom aides who were hired the entire year. So we kind of survived on 1 out of 4 classroom aides last year, and it's so nice to have 3 out of the 4 right now. It just makes a huge difference when you have the staff and the support that you need. Then the last few things is just things we do to celebrate our kids because they're doing amazing work. Even though our data is not where we want it to be and we truly don't reflect on the numbers, our kids are phenomenal. They are amazing. And I could talk to you all day long about how much I love our kids, but we celebrate them. We celebrate them with our Wig Day celebrations. That's our wildly important goals. And so if they're meeting those goals, we want to celebrate that. We also have our Lion Pride assemblies. And so Pride stands for positive attitude, respect, improvement, determination, and enthusiasm. Those are the things we're trying to instill in our kids aside from academics because we want them to grow up and be successful citizens. And so we celebrate that every month with our Pride promises. We have those sticker charts. And then lastly, we have specific data tracking systems, and we've taken a deeper dive into the data to make sure we are looking specifically at every single kid to give them what they need. And that's all. Questions?
Sorry. That's great, and it all looks really, really amazing. My questions are actually less about this and maybe more for admin. It's been a long month. I forget things. Wondering if we could get some definitions for some of the abbreviations that were used, and the 3 in particular. If someone could really quick, I know we're seeing growth in the Lexile quantile, but specifically what portion of the data is that referencing? In the behavior stuff, you reference the PBS, and then with the PD, which I know, professional development, the PLCs.
Yeah, so first of all, PBS is positive behavior support. And so you all approved a contract for that last year for us to be able to do that. So thank you all again for that. PLCs is professional learning communities. And so that's when we meet once a week with our teachers as grade level teams. And we take a deeper dive into their data as well as provide professional development. So PD would be that professional development that we're providing in there. And then did you have another question? Yeah. So the Lexile quantile is tied to iReady, and so it's like a range of where our kids are falling. So when we're talking about Lexile, we're looking at reading, and when we're talking about quantile, that is with math within iReady. And
if I may jump in here, there's a table and there are various numbers. It's not like 0 to 10, 10 to 20, but there may be like a 0 to 250 Lexile level that iReady gives to you. That means that anyone in that range is at a kindergarten level, and then there's like a 250 to 325. So there are ranges, and we have a table that we also go by that we have established to determine exactly what ranges they are with that reading level and with the math level. But what we're looking at here with that Lexile level, it's not, if the range is from, let's say, hypothetically 50 to 100, we're not looking at those that are at the bottom, closer to the 50 to 60. We're looking at those that are in the middle, the 60 to 80 range and above, to determine that they're on level. So again, more to come with that in terms of truly rolling out. We got a taste of it with Dr. B back in the summer when he established a chart, but that range, like you said, is that comes directly from what we have in our iReady data, and they have their ranges already established. So anything else?
So sort of an average growth. Growth by the average, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
Let's see. Did I turn it back on? All right, so one of the things that we wanted to make sure when we were looking at data was what was the probability that a student would be proficient. So when we look at a range, what we did was we started to look at numbers that put us above 55%. So if a student have a probability of 55% of being proficient, we then said, okay, they fell between this range and that range. And so what we did internally was we developed sort of a scale for us alongside Dr. B that allowed for us to look at what is the 55% probability that a student is proficient. And so though we have students who fall in that Lexile band of probability, they still have to be able to comprehend and do all of the other skills that it takes to be proficient. And so one of the things we wanted to do was to give students a marker, not only just for us as adults to support them, but she talked about those wildly important goals, those WIGs. Students are now having the ability to track their own data with that, and that allows for them to be owners of their own learning as well. But it puts them in a probability range of 55% of being proficient.
Yeah.
Range. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah. All good.
No, yeah. Yeah. I have to add, I'm glad you brought that up because that is a critical measure that we'll be using district-wide to determine those that are on level in their reading and math. In the past, we used the MAP data. MAP data changes, standards change, standards get all sorts of variation. MAP test gets thrown out, brought in. What we wanted to do is have a stable mechanism in place in Columbia Public Schools where every scholar would have that Lexile or quantile level, and that remains for now till eternity. And we're saying to our teachers, let's get them in this band so that we know they're more than likely going to be more successful on any, whether it's assessments, local, state, whatever it is. So that's a measure that we've just really a road we're going down right now, and we're also working with the homeschool communicators to inform parents about looking at those Lexile and quantile bands more intimately. We've had the data, but when Dr. B's come on board, we're now looking at it much more intimately, more meaningful for our district.
Thank you. I know it's been explained before, but it helps sometimes to hear it again so it sinks in.
Dr. Young, what are the chokeholds for the fights? Are they happening outside, in the cafeteria, in classrooms? What is that?
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a mixture of both. By and large, most of those are during those unstructured times when they're not with their like actual classroom teacher. So like lunch and recess or during specials times. And that's the power of our relationships too, because our kids thrive on relationships, and when they don't have as close of a connection with someone else that they spend maybe 50 minutes with or 40 minutes with versus the entire day, we're seeing that. We also have seen some in the classroom, and what we're kind of facing right now is becoming a little bit more of a community issue of just we're trying to teach the skills of like how do we behave at school versus how do we behave in the community of just because someone hits me, I don't need to hit them back and quote unquote defend myself. And so it's just like you wouldn't have been in trouble if you would have let that student have their reaction to the problem, and then I could have had a situation where I'm just talking to that student rather than talking to both of you because both of you decided to put hands on. And so that's kind of what we're going up against right now, and trying to educate our parents as well of just like our job is safety and learning in the classroom, and we need you to help us support that.
Can I ask a question about your technology use? I know you have to use your iPads for your iReady assessments. Do you, when you're doing your kick-ups, do you see teachers doing instruction on iPads also?
It just depends on the lesson. So it's like a combination. So, you might have like the teacher directed where they're doing a whole group instruction. It might be they're doing small group instruction, or they might have some stations going on where you might have a group of 5 kids working on their iPads with a specific app that's on those. And then another group might be over here working on word study and working on some words within this group. And then the teacher is working more on specific needs. So it's just a combo of all of that. So I don't even know if I could say what percentage of the time they're on the iPads, but they do definitely use it to help enhance the instruction.
So are they out in the classroom K through 5 at any time, or are there younger grades where they're
Yeah, so we have media cabinets in our classrooms, and the iPads stay in there. And then when it's time for them to get the iPads out, they get the iPads out.
I don't really. Well, I'll have to talk.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Next up, we have Ms. Morgan Neal from West Boulevard Elementary, and we're just pulling up her PowerPoint now.
All right, let's see. Yep, you can hear me. I'm a former music teacher, so I'm a little less worried about the microphone than others might be. But y'all make me a little nervous, but it'll be okay. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Morgan Neal, principal at West Boulevard Elementary School. And I'm proud to be able to share what we have going on at the WBE this year. So just a few things to highlight as we're going through. And I notice mine isn't quite as pretty as Dr. Young's. So nice job, lady. So starting off with our K through 2 students, I just wanted to highlight our noticing that our cohorts of students that are moving up are showing more proficiency at the beginning of the school year at the fall benchmark. So if you take a look at our kindergartners as compared to last year, we've made a marked jump in achievement as measured by that fall benchmark, as well as our first graders moving into second grade, specifically in the area of reading. As you can see in math, we are seeing specifically in first grade a jump in that proficiency with some minor upticks in the data for K and 2. Something else I would like to make sure to highlight is in the, goodness gracious, in reading, I have lost my place. Oh, there we go. That would be that nervousness again. I had moved on to the next page. I'd like to note on the next page with our 3rd through 5th graders, the big celebration that we have that you can see on this page has to do with our 3rd graders last year moving into our 4th graders this year. This group specifically is a group that we've been concerned about from the beginning. They didn't have a regular kindergarten year. They didn't have a regular first grade year because of all of the going back in seat, out of seat. And then again, in second grade, a large portion of them saw the unfortunate exit of a teacher mid-year, and that greatly affected their progress. But our 3rd grade team and now our 4th grade team have worked so darn hard to show this jump in proficiency and mastery now that they're 4th graders. We really look forward to seeing them continue to grow, especially in the area of reading. But if you look down, we're seeing an uptick also in math in that baseline proficiency at the beginning of the year in all grade levels. If you head on over to our subgroups, specifically in reading, I want to highlight the fact that we're seeing a jump in growth, specifically in our Hispanic population, an 11% jump in that fall baseline data, as well as going from below 5% to 11% in our Black scholars. Let's see, I don't want to miss anything. But across the board, there has been an increase in that baseline reading proficiency in Black, Hispanic, and multiracial subgroups. Now we're going to get to the page that Ms. Snodgrass and I have a little trouble with, but Dr. Yearwood was helping me out with that earlier this week. You can see that there's a discrepancy in the achievement level between our math achievement on iReady and the quantile measure. And we're going to be taking a look at that specifically having to do with teacher effect size and what we're doing from week to week to make sure that our students are meeting those goals and learning targets as measured in iReady, but also in using our everyday math materials. And we, in fact, we're one of the only schools in the district right now that has a Title I math specialist. And we sat down with her earlier this week to talk through how our students achieved grades 3 through 5 on the map, taking a look at specific standards and skill gaps that there may have been, and seeing if we can address those students who need a little push or might have trouble in certain areas so that we can speak to those skills. And then we can compare it to what we're seeing on iReady and the areas of the different bands that they can address either with My Path lessons or direct instruction or small group skill gaps. All right, and our next page is our behavior data for this year compared to last year. We're seeing a drop from this point last year to this year. And I think it's important to note that the students that you see reflected up here last year, in fact, in our subgroups, this is one child. Well, wait, in second grade, it's one child. This is 2 children. And moving into this year, we're seeing a very small number that reflect the OSS data that we have. I believe that may be 3 different children. And all of those children that you see reflected in this data here have been brought to our building's problem-solving team. Their families have been connected to resources. Our family intervention specialist has intervened and connected with their family. We've gotten them identified for certain services like FACE and, oh goodness, what else? Bridge, or in some cases, even special education. So we've seen that marked drop in behavior data, and that's just a continued commitment. I say continued because it isn't a big change. Our school is established, we are highly qualified, and we keep doing what we do to help our kids. But that's a continued commitment to teaching and reteaching expectations. So this is our attendance data. We're pretty comparable to last year. You can see that specifically we aren't seeing a ton of growth per cohort going up. It's staying pretty steady, but we have put things in place, letting families know, form letters, proactive letters, comparing last year's attendance to this year's attendance, how many days, what that percentage is. We've identified our very highest attendance concerns, and we are working with agencies outside the school district to put their families in connection with the services that they need that may help with that. We've this year started a theme of WBE here. So we talk about all the time, what are you WBEing here to do? So are you here to learn? Are you here to see your friends? Are you here, gosh darn it, are you here? So, and that's been a big part of that. We're celebrating the students that are in seat and trying to connect more to the kiddos who maybe aren't in seat as much. So, moving right along, we have our kick-up data, and I just want to highlight near the bottom of our kick-up data in the rigor analysis, we are seeing less of the analyze, evaluate, and create. So this year we've put in place with our faculty, we said, you all are the experts. We see great things going on in your classroom. Each month, we're going to take a portion of our faculty meeting time, and we'd like you to share those high rigor or high yield instructional strategies with your colleagues. And so far this year, we've heard from our math specialist. She was talking about problem solving, specifically this student-directed problem solving, in a presentation about what was the title? Sense making versus answer getting. And this past week, our second grade team presented on cooperative learning strategies that they use in their classroom. So that's a way of getting the experts in the building connected to others who might want to try out some of these high-yield instructional strategies. So our strengths and challenges. Our strengths, I told the cabinet earlier this week, the list looks small, but it's because there are lots of sub-bullets and it just didn't fit. So something that I want to highlight most that isn't up there, and I'm sure that April and Suzette and Jean can attest to this, they've been in our building, they've been a part of activities, is the welcoming atmosphere. I tell people, we get you in, we hook you in, and then we won't let you go. That's how we get our subs to come. We mark it, you get in the door, we get your information, you're gonna love us. And that's also indicated in the community support that we get. We've had people come off the street from various churches in town, organizations, and just said, hey, we want to be a part of what you have going on here. My sister's brother's niece's nephew loves it here. I want to be a part too. And we've had garnered that community support through our partner in Ed, Forum Christian Church, a new informal partnership with Community United Methodist. Downtown Optimist is in talks with us to see if our goals fit together, and we can do that. And the foster grandparents program has been just a wonderful addition to our community. I skipped to the bottom, but now I'm going to go back up to the top. We have a highly qualified staff. If you go in classrooms, kiddos are working directly with a human, an adult. They are learning, they are engaged, they are thinking, they're wrestling with the problems that are put in front of them, and they are loved. And if you want to talk about data, that highly qualified staff, you can hold it up against our curriculum audit from last year. We are tied for #1 of all the Title I schools for retaining our staff, and that's because of the community we have. So let's see. As far as culture, we're committed to ongoing learning, both with our kiddos, but also with ourselves, sharing our learning with each other. We have teacher-led book studies where they are picking what applies to what our staff needs and goes along with our CSIP goals and putting that into play. So just this week, we started a book, Shifting the Balance, about bringing the science of reading logically into the balanced literacy classroom. So that opened up some really lively discussion on Monday about what that looked like. Some of our challenges that are going on, attendance is an ongoing issue, and some of that I feel like can be attributed to some facilities updates that we need. We've had some real HVAC concerns this year that we hope will be updated and addressed. It's a very old system in our building, and it's hard to get the parts to fix. Playground equipment, though it may not seem to directly go with attendance and achievement data, man, if you want to be at school, you'll be there. And one part of that is getting that social time at recess. And our playground equipment is a real issue. Lots of broken things that we can't get updated anymore. And in fact, our custodian just the other day said, Mrs. Neal, I went to West Boulevard when I was in elementary school, and that equipment was there when I was here 30 years ago. So updates would be helpful for that. And then finally, incomplete staffing, specifically in the area of classroom aides. We have 1 classroom aide. We're slated to have 3. And man, we use those aides for our interventions. And when we don't have all of them, it makes it more difficult. So whenever we get an application, we bring a person in, decide if they're right for our community. But man, we don't get many applications. So those are our challenges as a system. And there is a link at the bottom. Our staff did take a look at all of the data I'd be sharing with you and shared their own opinions of what our needs, celebrations, strengths are. We continue to use data binders. It's been in place in our building for a long time. When I was assistant principal 8 years ago at West Boulevard, we had them, and it's continued since then. Specifically, our teachers made a collective commitment this year to all have attendance trackers that students fill out. They also are tracking their academic goals, and so baseline would be that iReady data. And then any personal, oh, I did get it, any personal goal setting that you might have. Our instructional mentor and coach have been in classrooms using a device called a swivel to record lessons and replicate those. And our 2nd grade classrooms were featured in the PD days that Dr. Woods is going to be talking about later as models for our foundational literacy lessons, or learning foundational literacy. Oh, friends. Foundational literacy learning. And then finally, I mentioned the staffing woes with classroom aides and intervention. Mrs. Adams and I, my assistant principal, and I took control over the building schedule to coordinate when intervention times would happen so that we could flood that support when we do have aides. And that way it's not overlapping and we're having to choose one grade over another. We can always count on extra support during your intervention time to specifically meet skill gaps for specific students. And some celebrations that we have, as I mentioned, intervention, grades 1 through 5, it's up and running, and in some cases has been running for about a month. We just started that book study I told you about. Our teacher-created and led PD sessions have been featured at the district level, both for writing workshop and those foundational literacy learning sessions. Behaviors resulting in out-of-school suspension have decreased. And man, this year we have just a kick-butt team of instructional mentor and coach and school psych and diagnostician who are really helping our teachers see where they can make some slight changes to help students succeed, or helping us identify where we might be missing something. So, and that's all I got for you today. Can I answer any questions?
I think we get rid of that mic. That one's defective.
Dr. Porter, what'd you do?
Okay, that's much better. It's all your fault, Helen. I only had one question. I noticed the attendance rate for our Hispanic students had really fallen down. Have you been able to identify any specific consistency with that, or is it just kind of hit or miss, whatever?
I cannot truthfully say that I've looked specifically at that subpopulation. I can tell you anecdotally that we have had some of our Hispanic families who have just recently started school in the U.S., let alone in Colombia. And so getting started and getting in consistently has sometimes been a barrier. But our EL teacher, Jennifer Agents, is she's been such an advocate for our families and making sure that they're not falling through the cracks. I mean, Hispanic populations, we have a large Pashto population that she meets every day to get in the door. So I have not looked at that specifically, but I feel like when things come up, I know she's bringing it to all of our attention so we can address it. Thank you.
I have a question about your staff. Do you have a particular grade level where you have your newer staff? You said most of your staff has been there for a while. Where are the places where you have brand new?
We have 2 first-year teachers this year. We have one in kindergarten and another in first grade. Our kindergarten teacher, she student taught with us and was pretty embedded in our culture prior to starting this year. She's a CPS legacy, so she's been in our district and knows how things go. And our first grade teacher was a SIOSP across town at Rockbridge Elementary. And when we had a position, we went and checked her out and brought her into the fold. So those are our 2 brand new. We have, goodness gracious, 1 third-year teacher at this point. We would have hired her my first year as principal. And it's a pretty seasoned staff. And we do have the 1 international teacher who is teaching elementary. So she started with us in mid-September, but she comes with experience. She's just new to us.
What grade does she teach?
She's a learning specialist.
Oh, she's a learning
so she teaches special education resource.
Okay. I liked how you said you have your seasoned teachers or your high yield teachers sharing with their colleagues during your faculty meetings their strategies. So that's not just by grade level. Like a second grade teacher can be talking about high yield strategies to all grade levels.
Yes, ma'am.
That's awesome. Because I have heard at other schools they will pair up at their faculty meetings somebody from all different grade levels instead of having all the second grade teachers sit together, so that they're having conversations so that they can vertically align a little better. And so having that piece in there is wonderful. I mean, your data kind of makes me think, like, I got excited about your data because you can see the line going up. I mean, it's going in the right direction and you're making a lot of significant growth. So, keep doing what you're doing.
It's our teachers. We have some
I think
wonderful teachers.
Look at what you have in place, like your veteran teachers, your seasoned teachers, and the strategies that you're using, and then see how we can put those conditions in place at other buildings so that they can have the growth you're having, and whatever strategies you're using that are working, we need to duplicate those in other buildings.
It really speaks to our culture. Our motto for years and years and years, when I was assistant principal 8 years ago as well, was we are one, and we're one school, one family, one community, and you can routinely see teachers from different grade levels collaborating together, talking about problems of practice. We're not afraid to step into each other's classrooms and see what you're doing. And our instructional coach and mentor have been great about doing coaching with people. Just yesterday, one of my teachers and I were texting about what she saw when she went into another classroom, different grade level, to watch math and how she could get her students talking. And having those deep conversations about problem solving. So it really is us banding together to learn from each other. Any other questions? Well, I know I was nervous, but thank you for all for listening. You all are always welcome to come out and visit. Like I said, Suzette, April, Jean have been out in our building. Suzette even played piano for us for a fancy lunch one day. But come on by, we'll show you around or take you to classrooms. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Neal. Last but not least, Miss Mary Groupie from Hickman High School.
And so many of you are directly connected to Hickman. And then I realized who was going to be in the audience over there. And so many of you are directly connected to Hickman too. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Good morning. So principal-led day-to-days. First disclaimer, I don't always wear this sweater. Last year when I presented in front of some of you, I had the same sweater on. It was homecoming week. That week is also homecoming week this week. I don't own anything pink. This is it. I hope the name tag helps you with that, right? So thank you. I'm gonna keep this light, but you are gonna see really quickly that the data at Hickman is alarming. But luckily, it gives us a really clear direction about where we wanna go. To be in a room of so many people who love Hickman for a variety of reasons and put in countless hours to keep us standing and lit and have rides home, I appreciate it. So let's talk about our school. I've been telling my staff that Columbia Hickman is Columbia's school. It is a bellwether school for our whole district, and I believe that we are one of the most valuable tools to improve life for people in Columbia, period, point blank. So we're gonna look at our data, tell us where we are, and talk about where we're gonna go. Maybe? Am I too far away? I will manually click and it'll be all good. Here we go. Not gonna click there either. This will give me an opportunity to get my handwritten notes I left on the chair over here. Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to start with the be successful part of our school. So our SIP goal, doesn't need to have that. Oh, no, here we go. Okay, so I am new to Hickman. It's my second year. One of the first things I did was reorganize our administrative focus. And so in our building, things that are meant to directly affect attendance are all under one administrative team. Directly affect discipline and directly affect achievement are listed underneath them. You'll hear me use the phrase a lot: be present, be connected, be successful. This is some of our be successful data here. So just initially taking a look at this data, you will see that our end of course exams for the 2022-23 school year, we had some drops. We have a really high point here down in government, and I'll tell you a little bit about what happened there. But before we move down, I want to talk about algebra. So in algebra, you'll see there's a 1-point drop this year in the students that are overall proficient and advanced. But in our subcategory, we have 3% more students who are scoring advanced. 28% of students scoring proficient or advanced is not appropriate, not enough. We have to do much better. This small increase of 3% is signals that there are some sparks and some good things happening there. And tells me that we need to get really drilled down in those PLTs about what strategies are working and how we can continue and spread those across other PLTs. As we continue to move down, you'll see drops in biology, drops in English too. You'll see biology again has that small jump in advance. We're gonna try to use the same strategies we are for algebra with biology there too. But let's go down to government here. So our government PLT and our government classes made one of the biggest jumps in the whole district, 13 points. And you'll see that before last year, no one or under 5% of students were scoring at the advanced rate. So we have an 8% increase in advanced scoring and a 13% increase in scoring proficient or advanced. So what happened in government? Conflict happened. We had a PLT actually do the PLT process. We had members who have taught for a really long time and wanted to do some things the same way. And we had other members who were armed with data, had background in alternate content areas, used the heat map, used prioritized standards, and made some decisions about trying something different. They led their PLT, and they challenged the people in their group. That PLT galvanized together and really made some big jumps. And I was in a meeting before this, and we were also talking about that there's been some cross-curricular collaboration between our English department and our social studies department for a number of years, which the instructors that work closely with them also attribute to part of this gain. That's some good news. Now, this is a pattern you're going to see across the board. When we break down our data by a racial breakdown and ability status breakdown, you'll see that our students who identify as Black are scoring below 5% in the advanced area in algebra, biology, English 2, and government. They're not even showing up on our list. This is painful. It points to a very clear discrepancy in the outcomes for students who attend Hickman High School. You'll see American Indians also score in that place. The difference there is that we have a really stable population of Black students, where around 19 to 22% of our population is Black at Hickman. If we didn't see a discrepancy, we would see at least that percentage scoring in the advanced or proficient range. We have a big problem there. You'll see another large discrepancy in the area of students who identify or are served through IEP services. Very large discrepancy there. You also see that in our multiracial students. Why is this important? Because Hickman has a tradition of being an excellent academic program in school, and we are. Our work is to do that for every single student, regardless of ability status and regardless of race, class, or gender. Our attendance goals mirror the same areas. The same students who are not achieving academically are also struggling to come and attend school. We've had a drop since last year. We ended at 81.8%. We're at 77.5% right now. We'll see drops in every grade level, smallest drop in 9th grade since last year. You'll also see that every subcategory in the area of race has dropped. The largest drop we've seen is in students who receive IEP services. You'll see this pattern over and over and over again. This is a hard pill for the people in my building to swallow, especially the people that have committed their lives to Hickman and or anticipated staying at Hickman till they retire. But the data is telling us where we need to go. It's telling us that we can do some really powerful things, but we need to make sure that we're doing those things in a flexible and differentiated way, and making sure that we're not using one idea of excellence defined by a heteronormative, white, traditional idea of excellence, that's not the only tool we measure. We have big work to do here. When we get to some farther slides, we'll talk about what we're doing to intervene in these places. Behavioral incidents, now this is some great information for us, and I hope is a signal to what's to come. We've had a 74% drop in overall instances of behavior from this time last year. Yeah, that's really impressive. I'm very proud of that. Thank you. Yeah, it's really impressive. Thank you. It doesn't tell the whole story. Those of you that are tied into our group chats and our phone calls and our email strains know we've been struggling with fights and other conflicts on our campus. But that is true, and this is also true. Last year when I came to Hickman, the traditional mindset that you'll find in academics, you also will find throughout all of their disciplinary practices along with their scheduling practices. We're seeing what happens when you don't progress or flex with the times. So what have we done differently here? We'll talk about that in a little bit. The heart of that is that we're really working on the reason that people are struggling behaviorally. We're trying to be more proactive, and we're trying to listen. You'll see a huge drop also in the area of students who receive IEP services and the amount of OSS they've had. We went from 24 last year at this time to 9. Huge drop. Why is this important? Besides the fact that we want our schools to be calm, good places for everyone to learn. If students are not in school, we can't teach them. If they're not there because they're skipping, we can't teach them. If they're not there because of the way that we did discipline, we can't teach them. It's not going to get better outside. You'll see we had drops in OSS at every grade level. I'm also proud of that, except when we get to the seniors. We stayed strong at 3 there. I'm going to work on that senioritis component of that. Sociologically, it's just a little lower down on my priority list right now. You'll see we also had a drop in the area of students who identify as Black. It is the least dramatic drop. This tells me we're making some progress there, but also points to systemic issues that we still need to address. Good stuff starting here. We move to our kick-up data. I'll just draw your attention. This is a very small subgroup. This is only off about 270 responses. I think the most you'll see as we go through this is 301. We have 2,000 students, 156 members of our teaching staff, and an administrative team that is pushed to their bounds. I will tell you that our leadership council is embracing kick-ups and are going to come alongside with us and do some of those. Our building has a cultural fear of people from the outside. Part of my work is opening up those doors. Kick-ups are a great tool for us to get information from a bird's eye view Small pictures in the classrooms without feeling like it's targeted. So let's talk about what we see there. You're going to hear and see the same line of tradition throughout all of this. Let's start with the essential question. I'm not sure what other people's data looks like. I am disheartened that there's less people in our building posting their essential question and learning target than there are posting it. Why is this important? When you know where you're going, it makes it easier to have congruency in your lesson. It makes it easier to make changes in the moment. It makes it easier to abandon what's not working and what is working. It filters out all the other things that aren't connected directly to your prioritized learning standard. So where is the struggle with this coming from? There is an idea in Hickman from some veteran staff members that posting this dumbs down education, that somehow we're making it less rigorous for students. I'd love to see some research on that. I've never seen that. What I do know is that when we know where we're going, it's easier to get there. When the students that we're working to get in school, who've been out of school or who have been out for suspensions, them coming in, knowing that they can look at the board in every classroom and know exactly what we're doing regardless of what room they're in, we're gonna close some of those transitions that are really negative and make it hard to initiate a task. We're also gonna ensure that if there's an emergency and a teacher has to leave, it's very clear where we're going. We're also gonna ensure that everybody in every space knows exactly what work we're doing. This should be an easier sell than it is. It is indicative of this underlying idea that traditional schooling is the reason Hickman has had academic success in the past. I would challenge that and say that is not the reason. Let's go down to rigor analysis. You'll see the biggest portions of our rigor analysis here are the most traditional formats of teaching: understanding, remembering, and applying. Those are the most traditional work you could ask students to do. Makes sense that at Hickman High School, a place that stands on tradition, often to their detriment, that these are the things that we're relying on. It's pushing us towards a very clear picture of where we need to go. So let's look at our high yield practices. You'll see the same thing here. The high yield practices that are being used, which they themselves do improve learning outcomes, the ones that are being used the most are the ones that are teacher directed, which means the teacher is doing the bulk amount of the cognitive work. What research tells us is that when you have students doing the bulk amount of the cognitive work, you're going to make the biggest jumps most quickly, and you're going to develop people who internalize the want to learn on their own. I am glad we're using high yield teaching strategies. It is evident in our data that our work is to move from being traditional and move forward and embrace tools that we know research is telling us will make a bigger impact. I'm really excited about the ideas of the Tier 1 instructional practices that Avid has and utilizes. Not only are they proven by research, they're well packaged, easy to understand, and they shift the cognitive work to the students. Low yield, another not big surprise here. Most traditional way to have school is a whole group lecture. That's what it looked like in 1909 in Hickman's hallways, and that's what it looks like in a variety of our classrooms now. We have excellent educators. I mean, we have incredible teachers. Some of them I was lucky enough to have when I was there. What I want us to do is embrace the idea that we are excellent and we're excellent, and to maintain and continue to be excellent, we have to be lifelong learners and continue to grow. Student engagement, this won't surprise you either. Almost a 50-50 split between authentic and compliant. In traditional school, if you were quiet, sat in your role, did your homework, brought your Kleenex, erased your board the way you're supposed to, and were compliant, you succeeded academically. As we go down the line of SRG, and I can't tell you how excited I am to embrace the idea of dividing behavior from demonstrating your academic understanding of a content area, I hope to see this inverted. I hope to see that we have much more authentic engagement because we ourselves, as educators in the school, are less content on creating students that look like and act like students from a long time ago. All right, our strengths, and I will shout out Adam. He will tell you that I struggle sometimes to come up with the good stuff. So he really prompted me to work on this piece. So attendance, being present. Our strengths in that area, our ninth graders were our smallest drop, only 2%. So what I am reading into that and seeing in that is that they're coming to us and they want to be there. And so our job is to try to stave off that steep fall that we say the later years that come. So we can work with those ninth graders. How can we hook them now? Get them connected to school, make them want to be there so we don't see that drop in the years to come. Our strength in being connected, we have a 75% drop in incidents as total, which lead us down the path to OSS, and a 74% drop in OSS. This is a huge change for us. I'm so proud of it. It's definitely connected to our embodying the work and ideas of restorative practices authentically and appropriately. We changed our ISS room from being ISS and school suspension to being a reset room. We opened it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That was based on last year. In my collaboration with Battle, they were not able to staff their ISS room for part of the year, and they still made it and made huge jumps. That, coupled with my understanding and professional development and restorative practices, along with some of the other people on my administrative team, made us really reflect on, is that the best use of our FTE? Are we getting the outcomes we want? And when we looked at the data, ISS was not giving us the outcome we wanted, which was to stop students from behaving in a way that they keeps them out of class. Well, we're seeing this new approach that includes having them think through why they're there, getting at the root of the issue, having a targeted person in there who is restorative practice trained. We're seeing a difference, and I'm proud of it. Then be successful, our rise in our government EOC. On this PLT, we have some really driven, powerful, smart people. I am working to being okay that adults are motivated by competing with each other. I love to win an Uno. I'm down to beaching cards. I struggle in a professional setting with competition with each other because I don't think our greatness come on someone else's back. But everybody's not me, and this PLT is evident of that. When one group saw another one making that change, it was about the kids and also about them wanting to be able to progress professionally. I'm going to embrace it that way. Our challenges, you'll see here, it's the same in every category: being present, being connected, being successful. Students who identify as Black or multiracial, their achievement, their discipline, and their attendance is disproportionately represented across the board. Students who are served through IEP services, their graduation rate, along with students who graduate from Hickman who identify as Black or multiracial, is 14 to 16% lower than both Battle and Rockbridge. So what does that tell us? We have some really targeted work to do, and we know what area to do it in. So what are we doing? We're going to focus on the same 3 identifying groups that we talked about this whole time. We're going to give some professional development to case managers specifically. We have the most special education students in a secondary building. We were grateful to have the addition of a learning specialist because our numbers continue to grow. Thank you for that. We're going to work on ways to make their insurmountable job more doable and more streamlined so that they can feel more able to be the first line of defense when a kid is not at school. One of the things that Rockbridge High School is doing is they've embraced the idea of an overall staff attendance goal. So getting 90% of their staff to take attendance at appropriately times. I am interested in that idea. We are working to reallocate some clerical staff so that we can put in incentives like that and actually track them and make them meaningful. We've talked about restorative practices a little bit already. In every one of my faculty meetings, I'm giving a basic component of restorative practices, and I'm tying it in across the board. I'm doing it from a lens of this is a principal who's operating out of a restorative framework to increase the relevance and rigor for the teachers and to see that embedding restorative practices in your life, top to bottom, doesn't mean you're adding something else to your plate. It gives you some tools to reflect personally on how you can control the things within your control, and in this case, improve learning outcomes. We're taking the opportunity when a teacher wants us to come in and correct a negative situation to try to do classroom circles. We've had a number of experiences thus far this year, my assistant principal Jen Kane and I, where we got to go in and spend full blocks doing these circles. And what's come out of that is a real growth in community, teachers seeing it actually work, and having students share with us things that I would have never have known. For example, I learned a lot about bathrooms for 9th graders at our building, more than I ever wanted to know. But it gave me some direction about things that we need to do managerially and things that were on the top of their mind and things they were worrying about during passing time when I really want them to be able to center themselves and get ready to learn the next block. So let's move down to being successful. Our counseling department is working on prescriptive graduation plans. So any student that's not on track to graduate that we have access to on our roster, they're having prescriptive plans. They're looking in detail at what the student needs, what we have to offer, and making a plan, connecting it with the people who are part of that support team and tracking it. We're hoping that those will all be completed by the end of November. The district, and shout out to Dave and Aid, is giving us a lot of tools to better utilize EOCs, one of those being the heat map. I left my department chair meeting this morning with my core department chairs begging for more access to tools to utilize to get them ready for the EOC. This is what we want. I'm going to be talking to many of you about how to get that information into their hands. In equity training, I am grateful. Carla was very flexible with me on this. On the 27th of October, Hickman's going to have 2 of our equity trainings for the year in the same day. The reason I pushed and thought this was so important is that both of the equity training modules this year are based on data. The first one is based on district-wide data, and the second one is based on building-level data. Because our data is so clear in what the work we need to do, and our timeline for needing it to be done is tighter than some other places, I felt like the sooner that we could get both of those experiences under our staff's belt, the better. And they are hearing me talk about the data a lot. I'll just tell you, when we set the agenda for my department chair meeting today, they asked me, is it going to be new data? And I was like, yeah, some of it will be new. It will also be updated other versions, and it will be the same data that we see all the time. So I giggle to say, that tells me that I'm talking about data. It also tells me that we have some work to do in understanding that this is going to be the thing that really directs us. So our celebrations, 9th graders only dropping 2%. We want to figure out, why are they coming more than their peers, and what can we do to keep them there? This drop in our incidents of discipline across the board, very proud of those. And we have 5 national merit finalists, which is pretty incredible. Hickman won the Como Careers competition this summer, which was based on the idea of it's like a minute to pitch it idea. You win money to then put into practice to get students connected with careers. We're doing that in our advisory class. It's very exciting. And what's happening on our government EOC not only is teaching me lessons about motivation with adults, but we're hearing about it, and it's shooting out sparks in our building. In one of our first faculty meetings, I mentioned it. We've had some PLTs making big progress. And members of that PLT, not the people that started it, but people who got along, raised their hand and said, it's government. Just make sure they know it's government. And it was, and they did a great job. But that is also a temperature check that they care and they want to be a part of this. So I'd open the floor up to any questions about what you've seen here or about Hickman in general.
Thank you, Principal Barbie, for that. Question, oh, this might be a bad mic too. So social studies and government were always my favorite classes, and so that's awesome to see that that's going up. How can you take what, I don't want to, what the young blood teachers in the building brought to the more veteran teachers and said, hey, this is the new way to do things. How can we spread that to, or is that starting to work in with algebra and biology and English in those same departments?
The lucky thing is that both sides have things they need to add to each other, right? So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I hope I can say that, that there are a lot of practices that our veteran teachers do that have laid the foundation for Hickman to be seen the way it has in the community. Our new teachers, lots of my work is about empowering them, raising up their voices, and highlighting when they're making progress. Well, I'll tell you that I'm examining and looking at leadership structures inside our building. One of the things when you have a building where people stay for a really long time is that the same people are in the same roles for a very long time, which gives longevity, can give stability, but also can mean that there are people not at the table that need to be. And so PLTs, our professional learning teams, I think are key to that. Something that regardless of if you're a veteran or new at Hickman is that you want to do well, you want to be excellent. I think once we can connect the dots that this is what we're seeing where excellence happens, at least in government, that's what worked. But I don't anticipate it to be fast. I will tell you, we did a team building exercise in the first days of school where I asked everyone to line up in their years of service to Hickman. We have someone who graduated a number of years after me, and they were right like 75% this way. And they'd only been teaching for 8 years. So 75% of our staff has only been at Hickman for less than 8 years. It's really powerful for me as a leader to see that this other 25% holds so much power in a building and so much respect and have been there for so many people for so long. But they are 25%. And we have this other 75% here. If you have any ideas, I will take them.
I have a question about your attendance. Have you noticed any patterns about the low attendance? Is it after lunch? Is it first block? Is it on certain days? Can you find any patterns there?
So the patterns I see is that the people who aren't engaged in school are less likely to come to school. A unique circumstance to Hickman High School versus our other high schools is our placement inside the town. I will call us proudly an urban school. We are surrounded by opportunities and pools that no other secondary building, comprehensive high school, is under the same level of enticement and freedom to gain access to downtown, to the parks, to the community. I worked at Rockbridge for a long time, and I loved my time there. And there are parks and there are places to go there, but it is not close to the circumstances we have. So I think a large portion of that is a pull from the community and students not feeling comfortable inside our building. Yesterday was our charity fair for homecoming, and there were more students on campus at lunch than I can ever remember. And I stood with administrators who, if you've ever been to the charity fair, it is wild. There's a lot of kids buying food and overwhelming to supervise. More than one said to me independently, we don't have enough time or energy to do more of this, but there are kids on campus that are never on campus at lunch, so they're right here. So the pattern is the kids that aren't engaged at school aren't there. And in our placement, it's easier to get off campus and get on campus than in other places. What you'll see in some of the data we'll talk about, possibly at a later time, is the number one tool Hickman has that's proven to improve learning outcomes, attendance, and discipline is to be involved in activities and athletics and clubs. If you're involved in activity or athletic and club, your ACT score at Hickman will be a number of points higher. Your likelihood to have a discipline referral is 0.7 if you're connected to a club and activity. If you're not, it's 3. Your attendance goes up by 5 to 10% being part of a club or activity. So I am embracing and looking at ways that we can manage our building to allow access to more things that are driven by students' passions when it comes to clubs and activities, not just because I want them to have fun and enjoy school, but because it's the most proven tool that we have that's embedded in our culture that improves outcomes in all 3 of those areas very quickly.
I have a couple of questions. One of them is about attendance. You have a really significant drop off in attendance for your IEP students. Have you been able to attribute that to a top factor or a variety of factors?
It's a really big drop. It's a 36% drop from last year. So such a significant drop that I believe that a component of that is the way that we are calculating and recording attendance data. One of the things in the reallocating of clerical support is that we're going to have a secretary whose responsibility is to support school improvement. So they're going to pull, crunch numbers, and chase down initiatives. Originally, we hoped that attendance secretaries, based on what administrators they're supporting, would be able to do that, but that's not realistic in their current setting. They have 700 kids just about apiece. So what we hope to do is to go back and look at and see if there's not systemically has a person not taking attendance all year. Is there someone that doesn't have access to a clear touch, so they use their laptop, but the Wi-Fi doesn't work in the room and it never gets computed? Is there someone putting in the wrong codes? So that clerical switch should happen in the first week of November. I hope by the end of November, we will have more reliable data that we can then target really specifically. But you'll see I put professional development for case managers. I was a case manager. I loved every second of it. It was my second favorite job after being an assistant principal. What I loved about it was that family, it was me and them. And that when they came to the building, they knew they had us. Administrators before me utilized a system and put in place a system that had responsibilities in attendance and discipline and achievement spread in a different way than Hickman is used to, and decentralized that work. I think that undercut the idea of all of this is our responsibility. That every kid in my classroom, their attendance, their discipline, and their achievement in every class is my responsibility. Every kid in the hallways, attendance, discipline, and achievement is my responsibility. Every kid in our building, no matter if I have them in class or not, is ours. So I think there's a cultural piece there. So we need to clean up our data, which means I had to find some resources to have people have time and energy to do that, so that the people who need to be making decisions are equipped with the appropriate information. Once we clean that up, we're really going to target, and I suspect we're going to see some really glaring places that's happening.
Another question that I had was on your rigor and instructional practices. Have you noticed any difference or breakout in classes that are like AP or honors classes, and how their rigor and high yield strategies work as opposed to, I call them the baseline, the baseline class that you have to take in school?
There are definitely differences in the way that we staff those sections, and so that's a lot of educational jargon. The way that we choose instructors to teach students that are in classes that are about remediation or are at-level classes. At Hickman, the way that that's been done in the past has been based on what the teacher's interest is specifically. And I don't want to undercut that there weren't decisions made about what teachers are really good in that spot, but I don't believe that that was the primary instance. So there is a difference. What I see is that there are silos of really excellent instruction happening. When we came and did some kick-ups, one of the conversations that we had was that there's great instruction happening in spaces, but it's not translating to the assessment in ways that we measure progress. So that tells me that we aren't targeted and really clear on what our teaching and prioritized standards are, which exactly mirror what we're seeing about the essential question. If you don't have a really clear picture about what you're doing that day or that time in class, or if you haven't backwards planned your whole semester based on primary or prioritized standards, it's going to be a lot easier to dive down into things that you're passionate about or that kids are passionate about or that were prioritized standards 5-10 years ago. So I think there's really powerful instruction happening in a variety of settings. I think we have to look at who teaches what we ask of them, and how we can utilize basic components of instruction and not feel as a staff that it is demoralizing or is below us to embrace some of the basic ideas of backwards design and universal design.
You rock. And I say that in the sense of it is not easy to come stand up here, talk to us, and know it's being recorded, and very, very truthfully, bluntly talk about what's going on, right? And you're talking about everything. And so, I don't even know why I'm crying, sorry.
I appreciate it, Blake, you know that.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the energy you're putting in to your staff and to your kids and to your families, because it shows. And it's not going to be easy, but you're showing the leadership that it takes to do what needs to happen. And you're standing by your data, you're using your data, you're showing people why it's important that we're doing this data collection, because without it, I think especially government right there, right? And what you just said earlier, we have really great teachers doing really great stuff. It's not translating though. So we got to figure out why. And so it's not that we have bad staff, it's just we got to figure out what's going on, that it's not translating into those scores at the end of the day. So
You're
I just
exactly right.
thank you.
We have excellent staff, and we have people who are working really hard, like very hard all the time. That's not a problem with my staff at Hickman. They're putting in a ton of hours. What I want us to grow and do is to prioritize our time in a way that allows us to move from survival to thriving. And I appreciate you saying that. And I'll tell you my number one worry is that the staff losing faith in me, for me speaking really directly. And that is my number one adult worry. And I would just say, as a person who grew up in Columbia and went to Blue Ridge and Derby Ridge and Oakland and Hickman and was served through special education classes and independent settings throughout those systems, the same families, the same people that I was in those classes and in those spaces with and that struggled then, many of them are the same ones that are struggling now. So my primary worry is, what are we going to do, Columbia? But my secondary worry is I don't want anybody inside my building to take what we're saying or what I am saying really clearly and honestly and authentically here as a direct attack on them. I also know, and shout out to restorative practices, that when people are disrupted from their positive affect, I love to work at Hickman. I love working there. I love our tradition of excellence. When they're faced with data like we're faced with, it disrupts that positive affect, and more often than not puts us in a place where we feel shame. And when we feel that shame, we can avoid the data, we can withdraw from the data, we can attack others, and we can attack ourselves. And so I am trying to use the tools I have to process what's happening. But if there is any message to take out of here, is that we have excellent instructors that work incredibly hard. And we have systemic things that we have to fight, some that are from our building and some from outside there. And we have to align our systems to make sure that we're making the most of the time and energy that we have. Thank you for saying that. And I am worried that people will see the recording and be upset and feel that I'm not standing for them. But I'm standing for them, and I'm standing for everybody else that grew up here. They deserve it too.
Thank you so much for sharing honestly what is going on in your school, and that it is primarily impacting those students who are in subpopulations that really should see some improvement. Black students, multiracial students, students with special services or IEPs, and that concerns me. I'm wondering about the attendance. My question is, have you broken it down between high incidence and low incidence to know where the attendance problems really are?
One of the most effective tools I have right now on my fingertips is this bubble list. And so what it does through Tableau is it lists off every student and their number of absences, and it breaks it down by percentage and lets me sort by that. So I can see a break off right now of who's at 10 days, who's at 20 days. It'll allow me to look at students that are really close to making the 90% and give them a nudge. So that's part of what I hope will happen, that reallocating of that clerical FTE in my building. I need the assistant principals, the department chairs, and the instructional leaders in my building to be equipped with data that's easy for them to process so that they can make moral, philosophical, and ethical decisions based on that data. So what I'm hoping will happen is that once we make these clerical changes, that data that is at our fingertips in Tableau can be made even more palatable and easy for people to process and work through. So that bubble list, that's important to know that who we target with what intervention. Whoever, if we have students who are at 88% attendance and their grades are C, the intervention they might need to get to 90% and bump that grade up could be, and most likely will be, very different than the intervention you need to do for a student who's got a 40% attendance and has a B. There are students out there who have very low attendance and can academically achieve. There are also students out there with very low attendance and are struggling to achieve. So the Tableau report, utilizing FT in my building, focused on our specific school improvement versus just what we've always done, I hope will equip us to target those students specifically. My initial list, the same kids are on the same list. Our low attendance, most discipline, lowest achievement. So the positive of the same kids being on the same list means if we dump some energy into specific students, we will see some growth in a number of places. That's the positive, even though it's really hard to see and predict, and that's a hard one. Yes, ma'am. Thank you all.
Thank you to Dr. Young, Mrs. Neal, not Adams, Neal, and Mary Groupie, Miss Groupie, for those presentations. I know it's nerve-wracking to get up in front of the board. You all did really well, and we appreciate what you shared. We'll move on to our summer construction update and turn the time over to Randy Gooch for that.
This one has my name on it, so it's working. I don't know. I'm going to invite Ron Munson, Director of Facilities Construction Services. He's going to give us what we're calling a summer construction update. I will say probably in the future, we just probably need to call it a construction update. Prior to COVID, it seemed like we had a lot more resolution at the end of summers. But with all the things that have happened with that supply chain and that sort of thing, some of these projects that are summer projects continue to kind of linger before we get them wrapped up. But he is going to cover the majority of the things that we at least initiated this summer, and just kind of give an update what the status is on finishing those up, and then he'll be willing to take your questions. And so, Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Randy. As Randy had alluded to, we have a presentation today on our construction projects, starting with our Boone County Nature School. An innovative partnership between CPS and the Missouri Department of Conservation, the building and associated grounds will serve our school district and 6 other Boone County schools districts. This project adds 20,000 square foot wood frame structure consisting of 4 nature-themed classrooms, separate lab spaces, nature and student-related lobby exhibits, 2 separate offices, and a 1,000 square foot storm shelter. On the same property, we have built the council house, also a wood frame structure with an open center consisting of 3 rows of bench-style seating in an octagon shape. Currently, the council house is complete and the nature school is expected to be completed by early spring of '24. Jeff Middle Addition. Construction began in October of '21, including an 18,000 square foot gym addition that also serves as a storm shelter for the building. Boys and girls locker room, concession stand, elevator with connecting skywalk to the original building, practice field, track and field runways, exterior storage and raised retaining wall. Currently, the project is in the complete stage and we're in the punch list phase. Russell Classroom Addition. Construction started May of '22. A 16,000 square foot, 8 classroom storm shelter, including elevator. It's scheduled to be complete middle of November. However, we're experiencing challenges with the installation of the actual elevator and trying to expedite that installation with the manufacturer and the builder. HVAC projects. At these locations, aged, less energy efficient units, and in some cases, non-working rooftop HVAC units were replaced with new energy efficient ones with extended warranties. 10 separate projects are on this slide that are in various stages of completion, with a majority of the replacement units already installed and the remaining to be installed by late winter. Chiller replacements. At these locations, we were able to replace the aged chiller plants with new chillers. Also upgrading the HVAC controls for more efficient ratings. Prep work is complete and waiting on the actual chillers that are scheduled to arrive late this winter. Like this winter. I wish it was today. On this slide is our secured vestibules. Construction began the day after regular session, creating secured vestibules at 6 of our schools. Part of these projects included ADA correction on the front entrances, and main offices were in some cases moved. And an overall remodel of the main entryways had taken place. Current status is that we're waiting for the arrival of the ballistic glass. That's scheduled to arrive mid-November. With the office furniture and some casework, all of these jobs are expected to be completed this winter, early winter. Roof replacement, we had one, Beulah Ralph, 90,000 square foot EPDM roof was replaced for new. Project started the day after regular session ended and was just completed last week. What we'll have is a 20-year warranty on that roof. At kitchen renovations, we were at Midway this past summer. Renovations started as soon as spring session was over, while sharing the building with summer school. Complete renovations to the kitchen area included equipment replacement, HVAC replacement, flooring replacement, electrical upgrades, and a new serving line window was created to the project. Project is now complete with a couple pending items on the final punch list left to be completed. Some pictures of flooring. At these locations, we had replaced some significant flooring. At Alpha Heart, we replaced over 10,000 square foot of deteriorated flooring with new resilient flooring. Replaced the flooring in part of the cafeteria, replaced the nosing on the cafeteria stage, the nosing and threads on all the main stairwells, and 2 smaller stairwells connecting to the basement, with a complete baseboard replacement on the lower level. Project is complete. We're waiting for a couple pieces on the main stairwell, nose trims. At Derby Ridge, over 20,000 square foot of VCT tile was installed on the basement level, replacing over 30-year-old carpet. Also included was flooring replacement in all the downstairs bathrooms. Clay tile was removed for epoxy surfaces. Also included in the basement remodel was the gym flooring. We had replaced the gym flooring after 22 years of service there. Mill Creek, we had a smaller flooring project there in the bathroom of the kindergarten classroom for an ADA project in conjunction with the secure vestibule that was also going at the school. Parkade, complete flooring replacement of the entire school, including classroom casework, office furniture replacement, media center carpet was replaced, removal of all the bathrooms' clay floor tiles for epoxy surfaces. Currently on the job, we're waiting for the arrival of office furniture, the finish of classroom bathrooms, a correction in the boys' gang bathroom on the main level, and several punch list items left to complete. Boiler replacements. At these locations, we had replaced our outdated steam boilers with new boilers. Along with the replacement, we will also update the computer controls for better efficiencies. Currently, we're waiting on the arrival of the actual boilers. Prep work is complete. The upcoming projects. Randy can speak better to the Elliott Battle and the Career Center and the Southwest Elementary. The 6 secured vestibules and ADA renovations. Those are or will be at Douglas, Field, Bethel Street, Ridgeway, Park, and Benton. Another example of the Rockbridge High School AV and the PAC and Gentry kitchen renovations. Both of those, we are currently in the beginning stages of design. Questions?
Ron, it's been a delight working with you for a number of years, and I just wanted to give you a shout out for all of this that you navigate. And also, one of the things left off the list was the Hickman Media Center remodel this year, which also looks absolutely fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrero.
I can give you a quick update on those three things he talked about as far as CACC. You have an action item on the agenda a little later. That means that all of those bids and all of that have come in. They've put them out. They're ready to accept, so they can lock in on that gross maximum price. Southwest, we're continuing. They're getting close to coming out, not final design, but very close to having final design, things intact. The systems now have kind of all been negotiated. We've done some value engineering as we go, and having to make some choices. What do we keep? What do we change? How can we do some things more efficiently? So that's where that project is. And then next week we will do the kickoff meeting for the Battle Elementary Edition. And we're a little further along in that because it's a smaller project and they've done some pre-work, so that will move pretty rapidly. But that will be in that kind of that bringing it out, talking about some design, working with committees and stuff to make some choices on how that ends up getting finished. So that's kind of the high level on those three projects. That brings it. Our goal when we're doing those additions is to bring the building up to that 600, 620 mark. So that's kind of the standard in all of those additions, like Russell, that's kind of where we go. So that's kind of that standard where we're shooting for. Well, and not that this is construction, but obviously, no, we were going to start working pretty quickly on the attendance areas. So that'll all be a very, very big part of that. Yeah, I don't want to go there yet. Wait for next month. We'll kick that up. But, so, Ron, more questions for Ron?
Principal said that West Boulevard was having problems with the temperature. So is that going to be resolved once that boiler comes in? I'm sorry.
So part of it, yes. Another part of that is we, in their classrooms, actual classrooms, about 15, 18 years ago, we put a new air conditioning system in. We've been, I will say, limping that along in the last 2 or 3 years. We found a new solution. Just last week, I actually found a new solution that we could incorporate to the old fan coils. And so that will make that a much better situation. We have 3 classrooms, to give you an example. We have 3 classrooms that we had to put window air conditioners in because of the units themselves not working. So we have fixed that. We'll take the window units out. But that's part of the challenges that she was certainly talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Munson. All right, and Randy, I assume, Mr. Gucci, you're going to give us a little bit more information about the new business item when we get there.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, then we'll turn it over, I guess, continue with you for the Special Services Transportation update.
All right, I'm going to bring Mr. Maltbilly in, and he's going to give you a update on special service transportation. Excuse me, special education transportation.
Good morning. Can you hear me well? Okay. Thank you. I was asked to come to give a special services presentation. So thank you for this opportunity to present. I first want to use this slide to kind of clarify the different bus types. So, ma'am? Okay, I'm sorry. So this bus type is type A. This one's not type B. I couldn't find the right picture, but I'll show you that later in the presentation. That's C, and that's a D. This is also, in our school district, affectionately known as 300 buses. So there would seem to be a little bit of miscommunication about when they spoke about 300 buses. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood that the Type A buses just nicknamed 300 buses. So special education by the numbers. So I wanted to provide some of this data for you. It's important to know that of all over the district, we have 380 scholars that are routed for special education. There's 33 buses routes that we go out every day to get these, and this is a super vast area. As we all know how big our area is, and a lot of times our kids come from 4 corners of this area, depending on their services. So it's kind of important to know that sometimes these things are very, very long routes. And I like to preface just some of these. All of our routes, all these scholars have been routed. And when we started with our the opt-in dates, and then how we came back again September 5th, I wanted to make sure that people understood that between that time we had 65 different routes that were changed. But I'll get to that point in just a minute. The routes average on this time is 35 to 40 minutes. Our shortest route is 8 minutes. Our longest route is 1 hour and 9 minutes. And we have 3 late buses that we have identified. And it's also important to note that we have no canceled routes. We've had every one of these. And I also want people to know that my background is special education. There's no more than I care about than making sure our underserved kids are taken care of. I've been a special ed administrator, teacher, and my wife's a special ed teacher, and this is something that I truly care about. Did I go too far? I did not. Okay. Of the 33 routes, there was only 3 late, so that we had noticed constant. There are other things that happen. One of the things that we do know after digging deep into the data was that we show up to these places on time. There is a discrepancy in the time that kids get off the bus, maybe get into the building, besides the 3 routes that we have identified. So I wanted to make sure that people understood those things, and those things takes a lot of time, and they should take time. But we also have different limitations from the times, where they come from, and the time that it gets there. I am grateful that this was brought to our attention, because it's important to try to do everything we can to make improvements. My first principal job in 2005, the best advice I ever got was, you know, you're in charge of everything from the floor to the ceiling, but the only thing you run is your shoes. Your job is to get everyone else to do their job. So bringing this to my attention gave me that opportunity to dig really deep into what was going on and what we could do outside of drivers to solve this problem. In order to make sure that we do this, what we've done at the beginning of the year, I send out Google Sheets for the daily regular education routes and for the special education routes. And when we do that, that's how we keep up with the data. So if there's a problem, if there's a late bus, it's after 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, the driver have to call into our dispatch and say, this bus has been 10 minutes late. That lets every principal know, or everybody in these buildings understand and know that this bus was late. This is also how, after 15 minutes, we can get a certain amount of liquidations if they are late. And the further they're late, we can also create liquidations because of that as well. So we using the Google Sheets to monitor. The problem in the gap that we found was that the way we monitor it, if it's not over 10 minutes, we don't see it unless we have a building that contacts us. And those 3 are the 3 that we knew. The other ones that we weren't able to just see through the data was that the fact that we were showing up on time within those times, but there seemed to be special education minutes being lost through different areas in different ways, probably from the time that they get to the school and get inside of their classroom. Typical reasons, that leads to the typical reasons for late routes. You know, there's distance between stops and schools that varies widely depending on the student's program. It is difficult to have efficient district-wide routes when this happens, but we do our best to route these and do what we can. The load time and or issues getting scholars on the bus sometimes is an issue, and we know that, and we honor that, and we try to take our time to get those things done. Sometimes scholars are not ready. You know, parents ask for drivers. Students this morning not feeling well, kind of cranky. All those things kind of factor into these times. We have the scholars that remove safety gear sometimes. We just had that happen the other day. You have to stop the bus, stop, make sure that these things are getting taken care of. And then something that's a little different over the last year or two is the paraprofessionals are being picked up at their home schools to start the route. So this increases time with the route. Whereas they used to park their car at students' houses, and I can understand why that changed. But that also creates ways where these routes become a little bit longer as we go through. And frequently adding students to routes or changes. I mean, these things constantly happen. We get addition, there's a change, it adds to the time. And so we do everything we can to try to make sure that these things are working out. But every time a student's added, it does increase time. And then there's sometimes just, cranky students in the morning. We understand that, and there's kind of behavioral issues that go along with that. But again, I want to really point out no canceled routes. So when we get to the enrollments and the change requests, I mentioned earlier about the 65. So when we had on August the 10th, there it is, the first deadline. In between that, we say up to that point, we got everybody routed for the first 2 weeks of school. After that date, there's a 2-week span where we're like, nope, we're not doing anything. However, we do prioritize special education students, and those kids were being routed during this time. And so there were actually 65 of those, and that takes a lot of time. It takes time to route them, figure out drivers, figure out the routes, change things up. It takes a lot of time, and that goes along with, I couldn't tell you how many just regular parent stop changes that we got that we were also trying to work through during the same period of time. There was actually 3, which was Beulah, Battle, and then Park A. But Beulah and Battle created the biggest issues that we identified. The average late arrival was 1 to 8 minutes during that period of time. But it makes it difficult, it does. So before we go kind of like into the solutions, I wanted to make sure that we understand that from the time I went to the board meeting on the 9th and the time we sent out the other routes, that was a month's time. So from September 5th to October 9th when I presented this board, that was a month's time. And there were probably 300 or so stop changes that happened between that period of time through everything, including special education. So it does make it difficult. And there's kinks to work out. It takes time to work those kinks out. And then every time you think you got something worked out, something else pop up. And the main reason that I think we were looking at it differently is that, of course, like I mentioned, we're using those Google Sheets. We didn't see the gap in the data. We just kept looking at we needed another driver. And every time we'd hire a driver, for some reason, another driver got, released from duty. But we really dug into this, and I made sure that they kind of looked at some of these things to understand what we needed to do. We needed to dig deeper. We can't just see what we need a driver. Let's see what we can do to create some more solutions. So here are some of the solutions that we're going to work through. To help the buses that are late at Battle and Beulah, we're going to be adding a bus. So we do now have a driver that just finished up a week ago. And so we're going to split the 314 Battle High in half. We will give the bus 325 and 310 bus route in the morning, since he transports the students in the afternoon. 310 would transport the students. We split from 314. So 314 will have less students, meaning he will arrive at Battle on time. To help 332 arrive to NHE on time, we will be splitting the routes and adding a bus only for the morning. So we figured out some creative solutions to make sure that this happened. To help 319 arrive on time, we'll be moving the John Warner in the afternoon only, and to replace it with OMS that will end near Beulah. So he is able to arrive on time. To help with 309 at Parkade, we will be removing the RBE student and adding the student to 302, so 309 can start a little bit earlier. We could only really touch starting earlier once because of the ripple of the tiers that would cause other students to be late to school. We also add a bus for in the morning and afternoon to help with the routes we have removed or split. These may cost us a little bit more money, obviously, to add another route and to get some of these drivers to do extra duty, but we know it is important for our students. These changes will take place and start 10/24, so we are preparing this information and sending it out currently to make sure everyone knows about these changes. To end, just want to say that I can assure you that them folks over there are working extremely hard, and this stuff comes all day, every day. And we get put in situations sometimes where it's hard to make the right decision. The biggest examples I had the other morning, I had a parent who called and said, I was sitting in my car. It was raining, and that bus driver saw me. And when we got out of the car, he closed the door. We go look into this, and because I just didn't kind of sound right, but there's situations where if that happened during that whole route all the way to school, that we would have kids late, 20, 30 minutes late to school. You know, I asked that parent, would you, when you see the bus coming, to go ahead and get out, go ahead and move towards this? I said, because there's a ripple effect that happens. You know, every time we have a driver that goes the extra mile to pick up, do things for students and families, it comes back from the backside from the school saying, you guys are late. So it almost puts us in an impossible position, but that's why I say it's so important to keep these folks encouraged, just like we do with teachers, because the minute that breaks, we won't have the ability to give our scholars the best experiences possible. To that note, Friday morning, we're doing a breakfast for STA, so if any one of you want to come through between 8:30 and 9:30 just to show some support, there'll be biscuits and gravy. I'm inviting you to that. I think it's important for these guys to see, that we are all supporting it. And I can't be thankful enough for this cabinet. Everybody give me the time I need, anytime I need it to help, and everybody pitches in. It's super collaborative, and I appreciate this. And I also want to just point out, I remember Mr. Willoughby one time when I was getting hammered in an email from a parent, stepped in and kind of took control of that and gave me a little grace. And that I appreciate it, because it really makes it really important to know that you have board that supports you. Okay, I'll take questions.
Thank you for presenting this additional information. And 100% everyone on the board, I think, realizes that there are 1,000 moving pieces, and you're dealing with all the different families and the different buildings and the complicated routes and trying to make everything go smoothly, which is just incredible. So thank you for clarifying some of the information and for giving us this additional information. My only question is, have any students dropped from your roster, students that originally had signed up for bus transportation, have any of those dropped off? And if so, how many?
Special education students dropped off? Not that I'm aware of, no. That I'm aware of, no. We've routed every special education student. So if a student or a parent decide not to use that transportation, that would be the parent that decides that. But have we dropped it? Absolutely not.
Well, that's what I'm wondering is, like, have parents called in and said, my child no longer needs a bus?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And there's some things that happen there that I may not be aware of in that case, but for the most part that I know of, there's additions all the time, or different needs, or different actions that need to be taking place.
Okay, great.
Yes, ma'am.
You want to go? To come off of that, then, when you do get a new student that needs on these routes, communication out to the rest of the families on the route. Hey, we're going to be picking up 5 minutes, 10 minutes earlier. We're going to be picking up 5 minutes, 10 minutes later.
Yes, that once a route changes, that communication does go out.
And I'm sure I didn't even think about it until like today, that I'm sure these routes and all routes change all of the time.
Absolutely.
To where we get new kids that are showing up or kids that aren't showing up anymore, and you figure out, oh, we don't need to stop here anymore, and the routes and all of that changes all of the time. So I'm sure that this is a project that never stops. It's constantly changing and updating. So yeah, thank you and your team for undertaking that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've done is I've really encouraged and spoke with the staff over there at STA, because I take that seriously. So I'm really ingrained in what's going on over there, and to make sure that they're treating every parent respectfully. Sometimes anybody can have a bad day, but the amount of calls, the number of calls, when I get to a parent and I knew what was going on, I could just listen, try to be empathetic, and also just kind of give a broad understanding of what else is going on, to kind of get that parent to see that it was difficult. Why I had to wait 9 minutes? We had a lost kid, and people don't understand. And I get it. They have their problem, and we have to be empathetic to that simple problem and try to treat people as respectful as possible. And I think we've grown in that area and in the area of communication to buildings.
I was just wondering how many other students ride. You told us 330 receive services. How many other students ride the buses?
So we only gathered this data, and these were because these were special that needed special needs on the bus. There are a lot of other kids that have IEPs but don't have accommodations for transportation. So in special education, it depends on what you need, whether or not, and what accommodations you need, whether or not that's what's provided. So there's a ton of special education students that ride the regular ed buses.
With the with the a couple of routes seem to be pretty long. Are we seeing, whenever we're talking about the behaviors and the removal of safety equipment, are we seeing that behavior mainly in those longer routes, or are we seeing those across the board?
That can really depend. I think the longer routes is just tough period, right? I think that when a kid gets on there and they're on that longest ride of an hour, you can get stiff, you can get restless and all those things, but that can happen at any given time. There's no specific way that I've looked at data to know whether this is on a longer route or not, because it really happens more often than what people realize. And one of the things I have done is that sometimes because of that, those drivers don't put a lot of data in that communication log, but I'm making sure now that it doesn't matter. I mean, yes, we know it happens a lot, but that's no excuse not to add that information. So we need that information added to make sure that we can monitor the progress of what's going on.
I know there was a thing at the beginning of the year where students that were routed on the Route 300 buses wasn't maybe showing up in the right spot for parents in Infinite Campus. Do you know if that is, because I know you're going to be changing some routes here coming up next week. I just want to make sure parents are all really know where they can find the information if their child's affected.
Yes, that communication will be sent out guaranteed. I think at the beginning of the year, that confusion came in, working with Walt again, the collaboration here in this building, finding out that there was a file that wasn't uploaded. That was another file that was left in the system, and then our system on this side grabbed the wrong file, and so all those routes looked wrong. That was one of those hiccups that we had in the beginning. That was not necessarily on our side, but we worked together to figure it out and get that completed. So anytime a parent goes in Infinite Campus, once we put this in, they will be able to see it, and they will be communicated with.
Mr. Malpia, thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming. All right, we'll move on to our professional development survey results. Dr. Yearwood, you're in charge of this one.
Okay, thank you. We had 3 days of professional development. Our initial results from the sessions were very positive, and Dr. Woods, under the guidance of Ms. Adams and Mr. Moore, then did a more comprehensive survey to determine overall what was the net feelings from this survey. So he's going to share I call it the more overall, the more comprehensive look at what the outcomes were for the survey. So he has some data for that as soon as he gets it up and running.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So at the board meeting earlier this month, I came and shared a little bit about individual session feedback. And at the time, we didn't have the overall the overall experience evaluation. We sent this out on the Friday following the event. So that would have been the 6th, I believe. That went out like at 2:00 in the afternoon on Friday the 6th. We asked staff to complete the survey by 5:00 on the 13th. So they had a little over, basically 7 days to complete the survey. So I was super encouraged. We had 702 respondents, which is an overall solid response rate, in my opinion. And so I did want to just reiterate the session feedback. So this is what I shared with you at the board meeting earlier this month. And again, this is feedback on individual sessions, but what I really want to point out, because I'm going to come back to it here in a little bit, is generally the strongly agree and agree, those are the blue and red sections on these, hovered around 95 to 98%, some even a little bit higher than that. So like I said at the last meeting, our presenters did a fantastic job of presenting relevant and useful information. I had one that wouldn't fit on that last slide. Okay, but I want you to stick with, just kind of remember that 95, 96% or higher, because I think our overall session of feedback kind of aligns with that. So the first several questions on the survey were just sort of demographic in nature. Tell me about what level you teach at. And so we had around half that were preschool, elementary school, and half that were secondary or multiple levels. You can see the years of experience, whether you can see the actual bands or not. You can see a pretty even distribution across the experience levels. And then we also asked how many of the 3 days did you attend? And we had slightly under 3/4 reporting that they attended all 3 days. Okay, so selfishly, I wanted to know about the organization, because when we continue doing this, I need to know, are people able to navigate what they're giving? And so that was about 70, just shy of 71% of people felt like the schedule was organized and easily followed. Attendance information, I know that this is one question. So this is student attendance. I didn't specify that there, but I know that was one question that many had on their mind. Friday the 29th, the day prior to the PD, we had an attendance rate of 92%. On Thursday the 5th, when we came back, it was 92.3, and Friday the 6th, it was 91.4. Our year-long average through the 13th, which is when I pulled up this data, was 93.4%. And so these days, while slightly below the average, not tremendously below the average. Okay, so before I get into, before I get into all of the specifics, so many of the questions we asked were open-ended, and so I'm going to summarize about 5 of those questions for you. So that meant going through 702 separate responses 5 times. And so I want to give you the context here. So understand, I got to use all of my qualitative data analysis knowledge from my EDD program, and I hadn't done that in a while. I have all these tally marks in my office if you want to come see them. It's as fun as you think it was. So one of the questions I asked is, what went well about your preparation for this event? Because it did require some preparation. We're planning 3 days of your school year. It takes an investment of time. And I'm going to lead off every one of these with the number of responses that were blank. And the only reason for that is not a value judgment. I just want you to understand all my percentages are based on 702 opportunities to respond. But I think it's important to know not everyone chose to respond. And that's okay. They weren't required. And so no response is sort of a response, but I don't always know what that means. And so about 31% of the people left this one blank. But things that they identified as going well, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but there were several things. And my criteria for including an item was if at least 10 of the 702 people said it. And so there are many more responses to this question, but all of them had fewer than 10 responses. One thing that I think lines up well with our session feedback is choices for sessions, the presenter quality or the session quality, things they were excited about, having enough time to plan, how to plan in advance, session descriptions were helpful. Many people pointed out that the information was well organized or that their coordinator or principal helped with that organization. Several mentioned that they collaborated with their colleagues to make a plan. So I realized that anytime a person interprets data. Like if I'd had Mr. Moore interpret the data, he may have come up with slightly different categories. I'd like to think it would be pretty close to the same. I don't know that I could have convinced him to do it, but if I had, but I also wanted sort of what I view as an impartial observer to look at it. And with the rise of AI, I thought that would be a really great tool to utilize. And so I asked Claude.ai to do this. And I was super encouraged that if you notice, Claude's categories are really closely aligned with mine, which made me feel better. And also, one of, I think, the weaknesses of the AI is just that it's not telling me the percentages, right? It's not telling me how many people said these things. So, as a specific example, near the bottom it says maps and wayfinding. There were people who mentioned that it was helpful that they had the maps and that they appreciated that. There were not many people who said that. And so, it is, I think it's helpful. I think that to have what I would deem as an impartial third party sort of verify the takeaways, even though it's not a real person. And so what would have made your preparation easier? Again, about 29% left it blank. Overwhelmingly, the schedule. And so I'm going to go back real quick. I'm not actually going to click back, but I think I said about 70% of people said it was well organized and easy to follow, and about 30% said it wasn't, or had suggestions for how to improve it. Most of the feedback we got was very constructive, and so I broke that down by subcategories, right? Like simplify the schedule, fewer clicks, pre-registration. Some felt like the landing page where we organized our information was a little bit confusing. And so that was the overwhelming feedback. Maybe overwhelming is the wrong word, but the most prevalent feedback for the preparation. And then I had Claude do it again. I had Claude check me on all of these. But again, pretty closely aligned with what I found. Okay, so the overall experience. So those last two questions were about preparation. The overall experience, what went well, what was good about our PD experience. Again, about 17% were blank. But then after that, we can see that there's a variety of responses, quality sessions and presenters. People appreciated the choice and variety. They enjoyed the focus on mental health and wellness that we had at Rockbridge High School, and several other responses. I should also mention that if I got a piece of feedback that was multi-tiered, I counted it multiple times, right? So if you were to look back at my tally sheets, there's far more than 702 actual data points, right? Like, so one person's response might actually included 5 separate categories of feedback, and so I counted it all 5 times. All right, and again, Claude kind of verified the work that I did. Truth be told, I didn't think about AI until after I had done this. And I still would have wanted to do it myself because, again, it's not going to give me percentages, and I think that's important. Also, I was a little frustrated that I didn't think of that earlier. Ironically, when I interviewed for this position, my presentation was about AI. So. Okay, and then what would make the overall experience better? The blank rate on this one was less, about 9%. And so the overall PD experience would have been better, according to staff, not on consecutive days, more time for planning and processing, teacher-directed time. Those were the ones that hit double-digit percentages. Some of this I will add too is, the gist of the response is not on consecutive days, but it was hard to tease out, like, does that mean 3 is too many? Does that mean just don't do consecutive days at all? Like, not everyone was specific about that sort of feedback. And again, I had Claude run that data for me. One thing I wanted to go back to, you might have noticed that presenter vetting was up here. Like, I think I've mentioned before, I was a math teacher, so I kind of like geek out about the numbers, and when they align well, it makes me happy. That's about 2.4%. And you remember earlier I said, remember that like 96, 97%. So that kind of aligns, right? Like those probably represent the people who are maybe less satisfied with the presenters. And so, I don't know, I just thought that lined up nicely. Okay, I asked one more question that I wanted to share with the board, which was just what do you wish we would have offered that we didn't? What did you want to learn about that wasn't covered in these 3 days? And so I actually just had Claude do this one because I ran out of time before today, to be honest. It takes a really long time to go through that many lines. And so, so it gave several what it identified as key themes, but then I went one layer deeper, and I honestly didn't know if it would do it, but it did. I wanted to know by system level. So what did the elementary teachers want to know? What did the middle school teachers want to know? And we were able to get that as well. So elementary school had some specific focuses that they wanted to add, and middle and high school had some specific focuses that they wanted to add. But oh, okay. Well, they do exist, and I'll be happy to give those to Mr. Moore, and he can share those out. But mostly, I pulled those for my benefit, for the benefit of the professional development committee, because and for coordinators, because as we move forward, this is useful information for us. And so that's an overview of the 3 PD days. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Do you want this one? I can come around and we can do it like.
Okay, we'll try this maybe. I don't even know if this one's okay. So I don't know if switching them helps because that one was working okay before. Thinking about some of the feedback, one, I just want to thank you for sending the survey out, collecting the feedback, and actually so diligently sorting through it and really making sure that looking at it to make sure that like not only did you offer a really, even just by the data, well-received professional development overall, but the ways that it can be improved going forward, I think that's really essential. And so just want to thank you for that. But the other thing is thinking about, sort of as some of the feedback in terms of, the number of days, the time for processing, all those things. Do you have things that you have begun thinking about or considering in terms of like, where do we go from here, or what might be best practices? So like maybe 3 days, but fewer sessions so people can process more, or, I don't know, like what is the data sort of initially, understanding it can change as you continue to dive deeper into it, but are there some things that you're sort of initially popped out at you?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and as the type of person that I am, of course, the first thing I'm looking at is all the things that people. So I'm going to give you a very specific answer, and I know Dr. Yearwood and maybe Mr. Moore want to respond too. But for me, as the sort of organizer of the event, I've already begun work on like the schedule changes, because while it's hard to get 70% of people to agree on anything. And so I was encouraged by when people said it was well organized and easy to follow, but that's still a significant number of people who struggled with the how to do the days, right? And so I've already gone to work on different ways to organize the event so that it's more user-friendly, right? I probably can't get that number to 100%, but to me, 30% is still a significant number of individuals who struggled, and I don't want that to be the case. And so certainly some of that user-friendliness, I'll let Dr. Yearwood or Mr. Moore speak to the other parts, but from an organizer standpoint, I've already started work on how can I make this easier.
You're going to answer that question? Okay. Dr. Woods, you did a great job. I love that you kept tweeting out. We need more surveys. You really need to probably open a CPS-TV Twitter and push that out so that you can get more information over the time period. Your numbers are great. They say if you get 10%, it's really good. So this is great for that piece. One of the questions I had was there a app that people use or some kind of paper? Because I think that's what they're looking for.
Yeah. So great question. No, I did not have an app, although that is the solution I'm looking at for next year. And so I designed a landing page where if I'm in group A, I can pull up the schedule, the available sessions for my group for each day. So it brought up a list, and then you could click within, so it would say, here are the 8 o'clock sessions. You could click on it and it would take you to the description of each session. The issue is that I did it in Google Docs. And so every time you made a click, it opened a new tab, and it was super, like, it's fair to say that that's kind of annoying. And so that's one of those things that I'm looking to clean up. And so no on the app. Paper copies technically were an option. If someone wanted to print the booklets, they could. The issue is that in a traditional conference, many of us have probably been to conferences for various jobs. They're usually pretty focused at a target demographic. And while our target is focused, it's CPS educators, we serve such a variety of roles that if I were to print the Battle High School book, for example, it was 32 pages. And of those 32 pages, I was a high school math teacher, right? So of those 32 pages, there was probably about 2 pages that applied to me, right? And so it was really organizationally, it was a tremendous challenge, and I tried to make it as simple as I could, but I do think that there are things we could do better in that realm. Dr. Yearwood and Mr. Moore, do you have something to add about the other questions?
Yeah, I think. Can you all hear me? All right, I'm gonna double up and answer both questions because as we were sitting down, Seth and I had a wonderful time to just sit and read through a lot of those responses. Several of the recommendations and follow-up feedback points actually gave us some pretty concrete, here's some things that you can do to enhance that processing time. And so what Seth and I intend to do is sit down. Of course, he also referenced he'll talk with PDC, but it's about how do we collaborate and talk through what does processing actually look like. And really coming to a point. I'll give an example. We did provide at our Rockbridge High School location. We knew that it was in a window where our mental health checklist was something that our teachers were tasked with completing. And so in addition to building in time for them to do that work, we really wanted to have discussions around that mental health survey result. And so we embedded the combination of both. And so looking at ways that we can continue to enhance that processing through action is what Dr. Woods and I have been discussing and actually got some pretty concrete feedback from staff. In addition to looking at those elements, when we talk about the complexity, many of us will be attending, for instance, the MSBA conference. At that conference, they utilize tech and apps like Guidebook. And so one of the things that we are looking at and exploring is how do we leverage some of those platforms to enhance and extend our professional development within the district as well. It also gives us a means by which we can sort of track those survey results separate from just sending out the Google documents as well.
I do want to say you should have some ways to build up energy. So, the first people who hit the scavenger hunt win something, a way to send a message to their peers, because I'm going to tell you, teachers like that. They love it.
If we've learned anything so far,
I agree. I think that that's one of those things that can enhance the experience. And I also think that if we can get into something like app related to help organize some of that, honestly, like for me personally, like the biggest challenge was just the organization. It was just so much information. And then I appreciate that it was then in turn for the teachers. But I do think that there are some tools out there that will help us do this in a more streamlined fashion, would allow us to do some more of those fun things, would allow us, like you probably noticed, like some concerns with session availability or cancellation. Of course, that's going to happen, right? Like presenters got sick occasionally and we had to close sessions. But I would love to have a method better than hanging a sign on the door. And a lot of these apps would let me push out a notification like session whatever has been canceled today. We apologize for the inconvenience, right?
button's red. I didn't see it. Yeah, you know, this is our first iteration of this. I don't think this has been done in CPS. And when we look at the purpose, it's because of our daunting data that tells us we have to do something more and different. And the logistics that we have to think about is we're trying to educate 3,000 employees. We're trying to provide professional development for 3,000 employees. That in itself is very, very daunting. And so being able to have a collective days in which we can have that focus was something that, you know, we'd spoken about, because okay, 3,000 this day. Okay, well, 3,000 exit. You miss. It's not as focused. You know, it's like going to the MSBA conference. That's why you have, it's like a mini conference. You have conferences that are concurrently, because you want that focus to be in there. And there are things that we will do better. I mean, you know, I call it's a first-time learning experience, and we know that we're not perfect with it, and we want to get stronger. But ultimately, we have to get stronger as a district in the academic realm. We have to, and we have to think innovatively, and we have to keep pushing the envelope. If not, ultimately, we know the results with accreditation and APRs and all that. We know where we're heading right now. So, you know, but we will get better, and we will listen. You know, we wanted to really focus in on the input from our staff members to think of ways that we can improve. And I have to applaud Dr. Woods for doing that and really digging into the data. Okay.
I'm going to say for your freshman effort, that was a slam dunk. And I hope you name your app Woods AI.
That would be so cool.
I have one question, and it is kind of based on the feedback from teachers on what they would like more of. How quickly are you going to be able to implement that? Can that be shared with the buildings so that they can implement that even later this month?
That's a great question. I'm presenting this same information to our leadership at our leadership meeting next Wednesday. And so principals will have this information in their hands. I can't dig down to specific building. I didn't ask that question. I felt like maybe that was too identifiable. And so, but I can do it by system. And so I can share that out with buildings. You know, one other thing that we'll be doing just in general as a PD process is needs assessment. And in that one, we probably will get down to individual buildings or departments so that the right people have that data in their hands, right? Like it, and so that's something that actually is on our PD agenda, our PD committee agenda for next week. We meet with the PDC on Tuesday, and we're going to begin work on that survey to hopefully go out in December, and hopefully get at least as many responses as we did here, hopefully more. But you know, our PD priorities certainly should be guided by teacher input. That should be a piece of the puzzle, as well as our achievement data, as well as our behavior data, right? Like there are all sorts of components that go into setting PD priorities, but teacher voice will be a big part of that because obviously they're working with the kids every day.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, the next piece of our meeting has to do with the MSBA advocacy positions. Do one of our MSBA delegates want to just kind of briefly overview what we have going on?
Well, I'll try. This is my first go around to talk about something like this. So when we go to the MSBA conference in a couple of weeks, Blake and I will be at the delegate meeting where we apparently vote for some advocacy position changes or proposals. One of the changes is to an existing proposal just to, should I go over these?
I wouldn't go over every single one.
Okay. Okay, you guys all read them. We have, basically just in addition to increase support of gathering taxes from the new initiative that Missouri passed last year, including recreational marijuana. and then added several new positions supporting funding for public education. And so we'll be voting on those next year or next month.
I think the biggest thing just for us to know as y'all's delegates is if there is any strong feeling by our colleagues for, against, if you are wanting there to be any type of specific language change to what's there. Something to keep in mind is that the only language change that we could suggest at the delegate assembly is language changes to what is in red. So that like we couldn't alter other pieces of what a proposal is sitting there at. It's only what you see in red there that we could say, like, could we change that word or change this in that kind of space? But that's really, I think, just kind of the biggest piece of making sure that there was some guy, just making sure if there wasn't any, if there was, we're fine with y'all making the best judgment possible in the conversation. Great to know. One of the reasons, too, is that, as I said, proposals might come up in the discussion at the delegate assembly where language does get changed, or the conversation, we get a little bit more context because the people who make these proposals, they will have their delegate explain why that board submitted the proposal, as well as the advocacy committee, MSBA advocacy committee, will explain why they are making a recommendation for approval of that proposal or not approving, because that advocacy committee recommendation is there as well. So, I mean, that's kind of, we'll hear more information, but if there's any strong feelings about something, I think both April and I would appreciate knowing, just to kind of be able to have that as well.
I'll say I read through all of the proposals and I mean, I kind of agree with everything that's in red. I wouldn't strike anything. I didn't see anything that was glaringly missing. I would say if a proposal gets made and it's in line with our legislative priorities and our priorities as a district in general, I think you guys have good judgment and I trust you. Does anybody have any specific, yes or no, or just in general support for all the items in red? Okay. Godspeed, our delegates. Okay, we'll move on to new business. This is our only action item. Is there a motion to approve the consideration of the Columbia Area Career Center addition/renovation construction management at risk guaranteed maximum price proposal amendment?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Gooch.
We wanted in design, and they're making this maximum price. So, and if you go through the document, it also goes in and delineates the subcontractors in which they're awarding contracts to. So, based on whoa. I'm louder than you or something. Based on, just based on the document, if you've got questions, we can ask them specifically, but there's a whole lot of information in here specifically, and that's regulated by statute and the architectural procedure in which they all conform to. So this is exciting because they're getting ready to start making things happen there. The next one you'll see in this group of projects would be, will most likely be the Battle Edition, because that will move pretty quickly. Yes, sir, ma'am.
I was just curious and I apologize that I didn't have time to look it up. I know it's somewhere in past stuff. What was our original sort of budget allocation request in terms of like when we were envisioning the project? And how does that compare just to the quote? And I understand that things can change in the meantime. Like, I'm not trying to say we have to hold to anything. I'm just curious.
So, do you have that last number that we brought officially to them?
Yeah, sorry. So this is just the, again, the construction manager portion. I think in our budget for this current year is about 24 million, but that also includes some other stuff that's not included in this, like FF&E and those types of things that are what they call owner purchased items, technology, those things that are, and so I think our overall, but I mean, so I don't know if your question was originally like 3 years ago what the budget was, but we know like the original budgets for all three of these projects are monumentally different than what the actual, once we actually did the bids and the design and what we are getting within the last year, since we've been working with the construction manager and the architect about what the pricing might be. But this is definitely within the realm once we received all the bid packages back of what we thought it was going to be.
And so, and even when we add in the, like, the district responsibility for things, it might be a little over the initial 24 million, but like we're within.
Oh, we'll be
well
under
within the
that.
range.
I think we're within the $24 million amount.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's great. And that's really great that even as prices change, that with this process, we're able to keep it there. So thank you for bringing that to us and to both of you for
and
your
I will say
work.
as well, like part of the guarantee maximum price, Randy did say there's contingency in there, and part of that construction manager at risk agreement, if anything that is not used can either be put back into additional scope or returned to us in that project once the guaranteed maximum price amount is set.
And in this, particularly with the Career Center, we spent quite a bit of time yesterday, and we meet every other week. We are trying to put into conjunction with this project a lot of the CT grants that are available out there. So we were able to do a lot of that coordination yesterday on some key equipment things that still are reflected in this budget. But ultimately, we will probably be reimbursed 50 to 75% of some of those equipment pieces. So we're continuing to work that, and we're getting some rhythm on that. Everybody understands some of those parameters of the grants and how that can work. So that's part of the discussion all the way. Just looking, in that project, a large concern and what is driving some of the demolition of the existing building is the foundation. So we talked about contingents because there's a couple different variables in which we know we will need to remediate soil under that. But those are good discussions we're having now. And usually in the design build model, we don't have that ability to war game that out and really plan how we're gonna get there. So I think the process overall is going to pay good dividends for us and truly is making it able for us to manage some of the variables that we're seeing in construction now. So overall, I think it's going very well. It's kind of exciting to get to this point on one of these projects. So.
Randy, I was glad that you answered the soil issue because that was so expensive. The other question is, on the doors, are we responsible for the hardening and security? It says that doors, frames, hardware, furnished only. So I'm trying to understand what that means.
As far as the vestibule and the type security, that's all being built into the design.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so that won't be something that has to come along afterwards at all. No, that's all built into the design.
So it looks like we're slated to be able to be ready to roll it out fall of 25. Okay. And we're hopefully looking at not a lot of change orders because of this new model, right?
I think where we'll see some will be change orders that might be financially advantageous or might be a little bit more in that soil area, and that's what we talked about yesterday. But they've got a bracket of a contingency, but rather than commit to the most drastic solution, which is the most expensive, we've agreed we'll look at that as we get into it, because they don't think it will be a universal thing. There'll be areas that may need more remediation than others, but really keeping that. And that's the kind of discussions that we might not have been having in the other model, building model. It would have come as a change order, boom, and oh, what can we do? So that is one of the advantages of the construction management at risk, is just having those early discussions and just knowing what might be the big things. So I feel confident that we're in a good spot here.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you. I know workforce development and those skills, the skills development, it's part of our CSIP, and it's something that's important to us and important to our scholars, making them integral parts of the community and good citizens. So we're excited for that work to start, and thanks to Reinhardt Wilson for their work also. I think we're ready to vote. This will be a roll call vote. Mic's on, everybody.
It's on.
Okay, Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Ms. Farrow?
Yes.
Ms. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass?
Yes.
Ms. Waters?
Yes. All right, the maximum bid has been approved 7-0. We will adjourn to executive session. Do I have a motion?
Sure. In accordance with section 610.021, 1, 3, 6, 13, and 14 RSMO, I move that the Columbia Board of Education meet in executive session immediately following adjournment of this meeting at the Administration Building, 1818 West Worley Street, Columbia, Missouri, for purpose of considering issues regarding pupil issues, legal issues, personnel issues, and confidential or privileged communications between the district and its attorneys.
Second. This will be a roll call vote also.
Mr. Willoughby?
Yes.
Ms. Farrow?
Yes.
Ms. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Ms. Snodgrass?
Yes.
Ms. Waters?
Yes. Okay, we are adjourned to closed session. Thank you, everybody.